Welcome to this episode of Museum Monday on Viking.TV. My name is Ellen Marie Næss. I'm archaeologist and museum lecturer at the Viking Ship Museum in Oslo. With me today I have my good colleague and collection manager, archaeologist and PhD, Hanne Lovise Aannestad. She has invited us up to the museum storage, which is placed just outside Oslo city centre. Here we have a state-of-the-art storage rooms for the collection. And Hanne will tell us everything about the challenges and the techniques of taking care of the archaeological items for future research and display. And Hanne, this room certainly looks like a safe place. What kind of items do you keep inside here?
Thank you, Ellen-Maria. Welcome to the storage facilities. In this building we have approximately 2.3 million archaeological objects, and they demand different climates, different humidity to be taken care of. So today we're going to look at some of the objects from the Viking Age and look at some of the rooms and some of the measures that we take to keep them safe and to be able to show them to future generations. So this is a room full of boxes, and maybe it looks a bit boring. It's all these grey boxes, but actually this is one of the most exciting rooms in the museum storage, I think at least. And all the objects in this room are from the Viking ship burial. It is a really safe and stable room that take good care of the objects. And Ellen-Maria, do you want to help me to look at one of the objects? So this is an example of the objects that are in this storage room. This is actually a bedpost, and this is it was a luxurious bedpost with animal head, and probably the women from that was found in the burial was laid to rest in a bed like this. It has an animal head that are partly destroyed, and these beautiful carvings that are quite typical for the Viking Age or the Viking ship burial. The reason why these objects are so fragile is because they were treated with a chemical called alun. It's actually a salt that was used to prevent the destruction of the tree over 100 years ago. But now we know that alun is actually breaking down the tree and the structure in the tree, and have been done that the last 100 years. So the museum has a large research project that working on reversing and stabilizing all the objects in this room, and hopefully we will be able to show some more of these objects in the new museum. And we have a treat for you. And this is a really special object, so if you want to follow me over here. Ormens hode, it says. It means, it's a Norwegian term for the head of the serpent. And I will take off the lid. This is really an icon for the Norwegian Viking Age and for the maybe also international. So last Monday, Jan Bill showed you the Viking ship with the snake heads at the stem posts, but actually the ones on the ship are not original because they were in really bad shape when it was found. So here is the original snakehead that were attached to the Viking ship. It cannot be on display at the museum right now because it's so fragile, but hopefully when we open the new museum at Big Day with the Viking ship and the Viking collection, we want to show the audience this amazing original serpent's head from the ship, together with the ship. The Vikings really loved animals, and we see them on jewelry, on weapons, and on the boats, and on the beds, really everywhere. And they had both a religious and a more ontological or a deeper, symbolic and concrete meaning for the Vikings. And they even named the ships the sea serpent or the sea dragon. So it was a part of a power display when the Scandinavian seafarers went over the sea to the British Isle or to the continent, and they came on these sea serpents. But it is cold here. Do you want to go somewhere else?
Yeah.
But first we're going to go a place that is even colder than this. Many doors, many keys. So here we are in the special storage room for textiles, and in this room there is approximately 10 degrees Celsius. It's a bit cold to work in actually, but it is really important for the textile material. All these drawers has textiles from the Oslo grade, and I think next Monday you will see more of these textiles. So the reason for the low temperature in this room is because not to keep our head cool, but because it prevents the grey silverfish especially, but also other bugs from laying eggs. And the eggs, the grey silverfish eats textiles and eats everything really. So it's a big problem for museums and archives all over the world. So the low temperature in this storage is just one of several measures that we make to control and to try to prevent the destruction of the archaeological objects. So in the storage that we keep metals, we have low humidity, we have very stable buildings, we control the lighting in the rooms, especially with the textiles. Lighting is very bad for objects. And in all the storage rooms we have low oxygen, and that low oxygen prevents fire. So we have around 15.2% of oxygen inside all of the storage rooms. So, welcome to our lab. Here I have prepared some objects that I wanted to show you. This is kind of a typical objects that we have quite a few of in the storage rooms. And the Viking Age is special in many ways, but one of the very special things about the Viking Age is that we have a lot of graves. So the objects from the graves we can roughly separate into two categories, weapons and jewelry, and then some more working tools that also we have a lot of. And I have taken out some of both categories and some objects that I really want to show you. And I will start with the pearls. And the fun thing about the pearls in the Viking Age material, or the archaeological material from the Viking Age, is that it has colors. And the Vikings loved colors, but we don't usually see a lot of it because the organic materials are very destroyed and it all turns out gray or brown, but the pearls are really striking colors. And we know that the Vikings painted a lot and they had these really colorful clothes, but the only colors from the Viking Age that we have are in the pearls. They're very beautiful, I think, and they come from around the world actually. Some from Asia, some from Europe. We produced pearls in Norway in the Viking Age, but they were tended to be very small pearls, so most of the pearls are imported. It also tells about the kind of nearly global economy of exchange with objects and going from south to north and north to south. So pearls are very exciting. Together with the pearls, we usually find these brooches. And these are what we call oval brooches. They are very typical of the female dress of the Viking Age. This is a very early Viking Age example. They have very thin shell, but out during the Viking Age they tend to be larger and nearly baroque in its style, golden, big brooches. And the Viking Age women, at least at some what we today would call middle-class women, had two of these brooches that fastened the strap of the dress. And we find, of course, these brooches in Scandinavia, but we also find them in Scandinavian enclaves in Russia, Ukraine. We found them in France, in female graves in France, and on the British Isles. So this was a kind of a typical Scandinavian female fashion statement in this period. And as part of the personal equipment, we have a comb from the Viking Age. It's made of reindeer antler, and we actually have a lot of combs, both from the Viking Age and the period before, the Iron Age, early Iron Age. And some sources that describes Vikings, some written sources in England and France, describe the Vikings as dirty heathens and violent persons, like bullies. But we also have some sources that actually talk about the Viking as very well groomed, and actually so well groomed that they charmed ladies in England. So it was a problem, kind of a problem that the foreign people came and took away the ladies. And it makes sense because we find a lot of combs, and we find tweezers and other equipment that are made to, groom, and scissors, so they cut their hair and comb their beard, and yeah. And one other, as I mentioned, one other category of objects that we have a lot of from graves are the weapons. And I am especially fond of swords, so I thought I would show you a couple of swords that we have. But when I touch swords, I have to have the gloves on, because on the fingertips we have some fat in the skin, and the fat has some salt in it, and it is not good for the iron. It breaks down the iron. So I have to take on these gloves. So it's different kind of weapons in the graves, but the most usual are spears, axes, and swords. And from the medieval, a bit later written sources, we know that these weapons were kind of a basic equipment for the free men, that they were nearly made to have them and to maintain the weapons, so they were ready for action. So this is a sword. It's quite typical. It's a 10th century sword. We can see that from the hilt, and it's very fragile, so we have to take care when we lift it. And you see that it is bent, and it was probably bent before it was laid in the grave, and that is something that I find really exciting, because the bending and the destruction of many of the Viking swords in cremation graves are really a part of a ritual, a death ritual. So we, as archaeologists, we just find the material in the earth, but here we can see some physical expression of probably quite violent rituals that followed the funeral. So as Jan showed you last week, we have 3 Viking ships, and earlier today I showed you some wood from the Osberg burial that were Allen conserved, but here we have a couple of objects from the Gokstad ship, which was the warship that Jan showed. And in the Gokstad ship, it was filled with, as with Osberg, it was filled with objects of mainly household objects, but also some weapons. So this is a bucket from the Gokstad ship, and as you see, it's extremely well preserved, and that is because it was kind of sealed in a very stable environment with no oxygen. So that's why the wood has been preserved. So you see the carvings, quite simple but really effective carvings at the bottom of the bucket, and the way it was constructed. This is actually a form of bucket that we find throughout the 19th century in Norway. It's kind of a simple bucket made of wood. So the second object that I want to show you from the Gokstad is one that many people traditionally are interested in when they come to the museum. That is a shield. And as you see, the wood here are also very well preserved, but actually this is a combination of different shields, but because when the Gokstad ship was found, it was broken down, so they had to put together and reconstruct some of the shields. But we have boxes on boxes with shield parts from Gokstad. So this is a reconstruction. The shield boss, that is what we usually find in graves. So we know that the shield was integrated part of the warrior equipment together with the more offensive weapons. But usually we don't have any wood left. So this is how a Viking shield would look like. So here in the lab, the museum has conservators working on the objects, and in the storage rooms I talked about the kind of passive, the optimal preservation milieus, the climate that we do to preserve the objects, but sometimes some objects are in chemical processes that breaks them down. So then they have to go in here to the conservators and they work on the objects to stop these processes. So here people work on a really advanced chemist working against time. So welcome to our largest storage room at the museum. Here we have all the objects that doesn't fit any other place. And what I want to show you here today is something that we're very proud of. That is the staved church portals from the early medieval period. And the reason why I want to show you this is because actually this is kind of continuation of the rich culture of wood carvings that we see in the Viking Age. But from the Viking Age we don't have any preserved buildings, so the state churches are really the oldest standing building in Norway. And the state churches were built from the 10th to the 13th, 14th century. They were built and rebuilt up to modern time. And if you see the state church portals, they were placed on both sides of the door, so you entered the church. And they have rich carvings both of plants and animals. And as I mentioned earlier, the animals are really important in the Viking Age too, and in a different way than in the medieval Christian context. So based on what we know of the animal carvings in the Viking Age, we might be able to see inner eye, the longhouses from the Viking Age with this rich wood carving portals. So some of the changes we see from the Viking Age wood carvings and animal ornaments to the medieval animal or the wood carvings in the medieval period is that we get these plant motifs, and that's really an import from the continent and the Christian Europe. So they influence not only the religion of Scandinavia and Norway, but they also influence the art and the material culture that people used. But both the Viking and the medieval wood carvings also are examples of societies that were mostly illiterate. They told stories in pictures. They told stories with symbols, with the animals, with the plants. In Christian Europe, the lamb was Christ. The snake was Satan. This was not the case in the Viking Age. In the Viking Age, the snake was probably Midgardsormen that held the earth together. But there is some changes, but there's also a continuation that people used ornaments and used the material culture and their surroundings to telling stories that gave meaning.
Thank you, Hanne, for sharing some of the aspects of your important work of taking care of this cultural heritage. In the next episode of Museum Mondays, we will have a closer look at the Viking cosmology, and we will go back to the Viking Ship Museum at Bygdøy. We will now show a 5-minute film of the Viking journeys that we have made in cooperation with Viking. In the meantime, you could prepare your questions for the Q&A session, and we will be back in 5 minutes. See you then.
Ut fra skriften her vil jeg si at den stammer fra cirka det området.
Hello, and welcome to the question and answer session. I will try to answer your questions as best as I can. I hope you had a nice experience this far. So the first question is from Michael from Port Charlotte. He asks, what areas of Northern Europe did the majority of Vikings come from? Denmark, Iceland, Norway, Sweden. And this is really in Viking Age, the national states, Denmark, Iceland, Norway, Sweden, didn't really exist. So it's difficult to say something very concrete about that. But what we can say is that people from the area we call Norway today went mainly west to the British Isle. People from Denmark went mainly south, and people from today's Sweden went mainly to the Baltic Sea and east. This is a very general picture. And then in the early Viking Age, this was more or less the rule. In the later Viking Age, the Viking activities took quite another form. You get more professional seafarers, warriors that tend to make these bigger armies. The Great Heathen Army in the late 9th century that really consists of people from all over Scandinavia. So this is sort of an answer to that. We can't really say, but it has this geographical it's a different character in the different geographical areas, really. Jane from Vancouver in Canada, she asks, how many items do you have from the Osberg ship, and is it typical of the amount of materials you find in ship burials? And the short answer to that is no, it is not typical at all. The Osberg ship and the Gokstad ship, Gokstad ship burial, Osberg ship burial, is extremely well preserved. So usually in ship and boat burials, we only find iron and glass beads and stone, and organic materials like textiles and wood are generally not preserved at all. The secret with the Osberg and the Gokstad ship burials was that they were preserved in nearly air-free environment in this really muddy earth, so they didn't rot. Also, the Osberg ship burial was extremely big. This is not a typical. We only have a few ship burials in Scandinavia from this period, and so the wagons, the slades, the amount of livestock, all the objects are really not typical at all. And we had very good luck that it was preserved as well. Gail from Lancaster, he asks, why did they bury the ships? It is quite a few theories on that. I think that you will hear more about this next week when the program is about mythology. The short answer is that we think that this has something to do with the ship being a vessel that could carry the dead to an afterlife. We also know that the ship was important in the myth about the kings in the Viking Age, or so the ship, the burial in the ship is some sort of symbolizing the kings or the leaders linked to a mythological seeking. But you will hear more about that next week. Sandra from Colorado asks, when is the museum closing for 6 years? And we will close the museum next year in 2021. And we have to do that to make a secure place for the ships and the other objects in the exhibition when we build the new museum. So we try to close it for a short period as possible, but we also have to think about preserving the objects, so therefore we just had to close it. Hopefully we will be opening the new museum in 2025 or 2026. But stay tuned for more updates on that. Yeah, and Jane, she says, thank you for this very interesting special access to your museum. You're welcome. It always strikes me that some Viking designs, the dragon head on the ships, the state churches, etc., looks almost Chinese. Is there any evidence that Vikings went so far, or met perhaps Chinese influences on the Silk Road? And we know that we have Chinese silk in the Osberg ship, actually. Maybe you saw some fragments of that silk on the film a couple of minutes ago. But the Chinese, we call it, or it's popularly called Viking Age dragons, but actually it's not dragons, but it's some kind of hybrid animals, different sorts of hybrid animals that are present in the art in the Iron Age all over Europe. In the Viking Age, most of Europe were already Christians, and the animal art tends to mostly be in Scandinavia, in the heathen areas of Europe. The dragons in Chinese mythology are like a luck animal for luck. The snakes or the serpents in the Norse mythology, the most known of them are the Midgard's Orm, and he's circling the earth and actually holding it together, but it has some the dragon-like serpent in Norse mythology has some other connotations. So they might have met Chinese and they might have looked at each other's dragons, but we can't say that that is the same. But it's an interesting thought, though. Okay, John from Glenview. These programs are fantastic. Thank you to Viking. You're welcome from the Museum of Cultural History, and yeah, Viking. You're that's great that you enjoy this. Linda, she asked what type of wood is that snakehead bow decoration made of, and it's made of oak, as the whole Osberg ship is made of oak, and that is actually fantastic because you couldn't see that on the screen, but some of the oak from the Osberg burial is really well preserved. One of the problems with the Osberg ship is that it's so big that even if the oak is really well preserved, it is so heavy that it's kind of the danger of collapsing even though it's well preserved. The snakehead is of course not that well preserved, that's why we can't have it in the exhibition or on the ship, but
But oak tends to be better preserved because it's harder wood. Holly from Oxford in England in the United Kingdom, she asks, do you have any hopes of finding more Viking ship graves? Is there active exploration ongoing to find more? Where are you most likely to find more? Thank you, this is so interesting. And thank you, Holly, for an interesting question. Actually, if you stay tuned in not next week, but the week after that, we are going to have a program from our current excavation of a Viking ship. And that's actually the first time in over 100 years that we are excavating a Viking ship. It was found with this new technology called let's really stand still. Georadar. And it's actually it's a sort of X-ray of the ground. So a couple of years ago, we found this ship-shaped form in the earth between two other grave mounds, and now they are excavating it. So it's probably not as well preserved as the Osberg and Gokstad, but even though we really hope to find a lot of interesting things there that can tell us more about ship graves and this type of burial. Did women travel in the Viking ships? Asks Maria from Fort Lauderdale. Yes, they did. We tend to think about the Viking Age as a masculine warrior period where the male fights around Europe, the Scandinavian men, and females maybe at home looking after the livestock. And in many cases that was probably the case, but we also know that women went on the Viking ships. We know that from grave finds and the burial finds on the British Isle, that there were women there who was born in Scandinavia and buried on the British Isle. The same is the case at the continent. We have a few grave finds from there. We also find in these kind of Scandinavian settlements in Eastern Europe, in Ukraine and Russia. We also find female graves with typical Scandinavian female dress accessories. So we also reckon that this is Scandinavian women. I don't really know if they've done any isotope analysis. That is the way of researching where an individual was raised. I don't know if that's done on the Russian material, but the dress accessories probably points to that it was Scandinavian women that went out. And the Viking voyages is really a kind of a term that both contains the warrior expeditions, the trading expeditions, and settlements. So and the females were absolutely a part of that. And we also have some written sources that refer to the ships with both with Scandinavian warriors and with women and children. So yes. Can Tracy asks, can you now read the runestones? Do they tell a story or are they grave markers? Yes, I cannot read the runestones because I'm not a runologist, and that is a special branch of Old Norse studies. But all the runestones are read, some in different ways. Some of the runestones really tell a story. We have this famous runestone that are from the late Viking Age called Dinnasteinen, which is actually a sort of a mix between a picture stone with this really nice story that are the Christmas tell with Christ, with three kings, with the stable, and then it tells a story about a woman who raised this stone for her daughter, who was the most handy female on Hadeland, which is kind of a place in the middle of Norway, not middle of nowhere. And so this is a memory stone, as we call it. It's not actually a gravestone, but it's often raised in memory of someone that is dead. And most of the runestones are in Sweden, and they often refer to someone who raised the stone over someone who is dead, and often they are dead on travel. So it might be a sort of kind of a grave marking or a memory marking, but not on actual grave. That is not found very often, I think. So yeah, Philippe from Stewart in Florida. The wooden snake reminds me of something on board the Viking ocean ships. Do you know if there's the same design or a replica? Oops, I don't know really. But it, I read that before I realized that I couldn't answer that. But I think that is a good thing that the Viking ocean ships should really lift up. Is it a copy of the same design as we have in the Viking Ship Museum? Okay, so Alfonso from Prague, he asks, how did you get into your profession? What did you study? I find your profession very interesting. It must be amazing to be able to literally touch history. Yeah, it is amazing. It is, we at the museum, we tend to be a bit, we do this every day, and sometimes we really we forget that it actually is objects that are often many thousand years old that we touch. But in these kind of settings, when we are able to present something to others, I feel that I really re-appreciate the work that I do, and I hope that it's interesting for you to see. So Gloria from Camp Hill in the United States, she asks, how heavy is a shield? The shield that we have, that we showed you, is one of several shields from the Gokstad, and that is the wood are a bit dry. So we the new shield were probably a bit heavier. I would think that it could weigh 4 or 5 kilos, maybe. Over the wood, most of the shields were covered with leather, so that the wood would not break if there was an arrow that hit the shield, so it would be more stable. And that would also, when it's so big, the big leather patch would also add to the weight. But of course, it couldn't be more heavy that you could. You had to be able to hold it for quite a long period of time when you were fighting. So it's really you have to decide what's most important, protection or being able to stay out long. So, yeah. See. Yeah, Anne from Bedford, United States. She asks, with such delicate objects, why do you not wear gloves and hairnets so as to not contaminate the objects? And I think that she might have asked the question before I took on gloves, but you are absolutely right. I probably should have wear something on the head. When then it said we in the objects that we that are really important not to contaminate, that is human bones, especially vulnerable to contamination, because then in the bone material we can extract DNA. So that is some part of the collection we are really shielding. We use gloves, and when we take samples of this type of material, we wear headpieces and everything to protect it. And we, of course, we use gloves all the time when we are handling metals. But the wood are not that vulnerable. If I should have lifted some of the wood in the magazine, I would have wear gloves, but we just had it in the box, and then it is probably okay. It will be okay. So, well, I think that I don't really have time for much more questions. Thank you for sending us the question. I'm sorry that I didn't have time to answer all of them, but you will be able to ask more questions next week when Ellen Marie Næss, who's a lecturer at the Viking Age Museum and was a presenter at the film earlier today, she will go deeper into the mythology of the Viking Age and also talk more about the Oseberg ship burials and the 2 women that were found in this burial. So thank you again.